Laci Denise Rocha was born on May 4, 1975 in the sunny city of Modesto. Modesto is a small but cozy town in the central part of California, located in the San Joaquin Valley. It is known for its agricultural heritage, as it is located in one of the most fertile regions of the country. Almonds, grapes, dairy products, and many other crops are grown here. Thanks to these agricultural traditions, the atmosphere of the city is filled with the regularity and hard work of its inhabitants. Here Lacy's parents, Sharon and Denise Robert Grove, met in their school years and built a life together, owning a dairy farm west of Escalon. Sharon chose the name Lacy in honor of the girl who once impressed her with her beauty. Lacy grew up in a warm family, surrounded by care and support. She had an older brother, Brent, and together they often helped their parents on the farm and also enthusiastically engaged in gardening with their mother. This hobby has become a real passion for Lacy since childhood. However, family life changed when Lacy's parents divorced. Despite this, Sharon continued to raise her children with love, and soon, she met Ron Gronsky, who became a stepfather to Lacy and Brent. From an early age, Ron was not only an example for them, but also a real support, raising Lacy as his own daughter. Lacy's school years were filled with bright events. She was a cheerleader, attracting attention with her energy and charm. Already at a young age, Lacy was distinguished by a lively character, energy, and strong attachment to her family. She was a bright person who easily found a common language with others. After graduating from Thomas Downey High School, Lacy decided to continue her education at California Polytechnic State University. There she chose the specialty of decorative gardening, continuing the path that began with her childhood fascination with plants. After graduating from high school, Lacy enrolled at California State University in Fresno in the Department of Agronomy and planned a career in agriculture. During her studies, Lacy sometimes visited her friend, who worked at the Pacific Cafe restaurant in the picturesque town of Morro Bay. It was there, in the summer of 1994, that she first met her destiny, who at that time was a colleague of her friend. From the very beginning, there was a spark between the young people. Lacy, without waiting for accidents, took the initiative in her own hands. She left her phone number to the guy, making it clear that she was interested in communicating. This meeting made such a strong impression on her that she soon confessed to her mother, "I have met a man whom I will marry one day." The man's name was Scott Peterson. He was a charismatic and confident young man. He won Lacy over at first sight. Soon the couple began dating and their relationship developed very rapidly. Scott Lee Peterson was born on October 24, 1972 in sunny San Diego, the son of entrepreneurs Lee Peterson and Jacqueline Latham. Their family combined business acumen and family values. Lee owned a container company, and Jackie ran a fashion boutique in an upscale neighborhood. Scott was their only child together, as each of the spouses already had 3 children from previous marriages. Since childhood, Scott has been surrounded by comfort, but not without ambition. His early passion for golf began thanks to his father, who introduced him to this world of sports. By the age of 14, Scott had become such a skilled player that he was able to beat his mentor. At the University of San Diego High School, he continued to develop his skills by playing on the same team as future golf legend Phil Mickelson. At that time, Scott dreamed of a career as a professional athlete and was one of the best young golfers in the region. However, the path to the dream turned out to be difficult. After conflicts in the university golf team and a change in priorities, he decided to change his direction. Scott switched to studying agricultural business, deciding to focus on a more stable career. By that time, his relationship with Lacy had become serious, and he had finally given up on his athletic dreams in order to build a family and work-oriented future. 2 years later, Scott proposed to Lacy. Their wedding took place on August 9, 1997. The couple got married at the Sycamore Mineral Springs Resort in the Avila Valley of San Luis Obispo County. It was a simple but touching ceremony, surrounded by friends and family, which symbolized for them the beginning of a new chapter in their lives. The couple moved to Modesto, California, and began to equip their home together. Scott was selling fertilizers, and Lacy found a job as a substitute teacher. Their life seemed perfect. They both worked, built careers, and enjoyed moments together. Everyone around them saw them as a happily married couple who could live for many years in love and mutual understanding. In 2002, they found out that they would become parents. Lacy was thrilled to be a mother. They were looking forward to the birth of a baby boy whom they decided to name Connor. Lacy and Scott began to prepare for the role of parents. They chose children's furniture, a name for the child, and prepared for the arrival of the baby. Lacy lovingly set up the nursery and was generally an excellent housewife. The Petersons' house was cozy, and Lacy and Scott seemed the epitome of family happiness. But everything changed in one day. On a day that shocked not only their family, but the entire community of Modesto, and later, the whole country. On December 23, 2002, the morning began as usual for Laci Peterson and her husband, Scott. The couple, who were expecting the birth of their first child, were enjoying time at their home in Modesto, preparing for the holidays. At 5:45 p.m., they stopped by the salon where Laci's stepsister, Amy Rocha, worked. Amy cut Scott's hair regularly, and this visit didn't look out of the ordinary. Scott mentioned that he was planning to play golf that day at a nearby golf course. Later, around 8:30 p.m., Lacy called her mother, Sharon. They talked about something, and then went to get ready for bed. The next morning, December 24th, Christmas Eve, Scott announced that he was going fishing in Berkeley Harbor, located about 2 hours away from their home. Lacy was at home at the time, watching a cooking show, planning to wash the floor, bake cookies, and walk their dog, Mackenzie. Lacy was already 8 months pregnant, and any activity during that period attracted attention. Later in the morning, at about 10:30 a.m., neighbor Karen Service saw Mackenzie, the Peterson family dog, wandering near their house. The dog was alone and had a dirty leash on it. Karen took Mackenzie to the Petersons' backyard. At about 10:45 a.m., another neighbor, Mike Chiavetta, also saw the dog playing with his pet. However, he did not see the hostess of the house. When Scott returned home, he did not immediately notice that something was wrong. He expected to find his wife at home, since apparently she was there before he left. However, when Scott entered the house, he did not find Lacy at the place. He noted that his wife's car, a 1996 Land Rover Discovery SE, was parked in the driveway. He started looking for her around the house and the area around, but she was nowhere to be found. At first, Scott did not suspect anything unusual and assumed that Lacy might have gone out for a walk or left the house on some business of her own without warning him. He went to take a shower and wash his clothes because he got wet while fishing. However, the hours passed and she was not there. Scott began to worry. When Lacy still hadn't returned home that evening, Scott called his mother-in-law, Sharon Rochas. At about 5:15 p.m., he informed her of the situation. Shortly after, Lacy's stepfather, Ron Gransky, called the police to report his stepdaughter's disappearance. This day marked the beginning of a complex and confusing investigation that captured the attention of the whole country. When the police arrived at the Peterson house after the report of Lacy's disappearance, an inspection immediately began. By the evening, key details were discovered. Her purse with keys, wallet, and sunglasses was in the closet, and the dining table was set for a family dinner. On the kitchen table, one of the detectives noticed a telephone directory with a full-page advertisement for a lawyer. Scott Peterson behaved calmly, which aroused the suspicions of investigators. Detectives John Bueller and Alan Burkini, who handled the case, questioned him that evening. At first, Scott said he spent the day playing golf, but later admitted that he went fishing in Berkeley Harbor. At 2:15 p.m., he even left a voice message for Lacy. "Hi, beautiful. It's 2:15 now. I'm leaving Berkeley." Despite his efforts to appear calm, his behavior alerted investigators. Detective Burkini noted that Scott looked strange. It was a combination of politeness and arrogance, with notes of detachment and irritation. He didn't look at all like a man who was worried about his wife's disappearance. The day after the disappearance, a large-scale operation began. Police, firefighters, and volunteers worked along Dry Creek. Helicopters with searchlights, police on horseback and bicycles, dog handlers, and water rescue teams were involved. The operation was led by 30 police officers, and Lacy's family and hundreds of volunteers distributed leaflets around the city. In the first 2 days, about 900 people took part in the search. An improvised headquarters was set up in the nearby Red Lion Hotel to coordinate actions. A reward was announced, which at first was $25,000, but eventually increased to $500,000 for any information that could shed light on her disappearance. With the growing interest in the case, the tension around Scott Peterson intensified, and his strange behavior continued to raise doubts among investigators and others. He continued to cooperate with law enforcement agencies, but his statements caused increasing confusion among investigators. Despite the initial cooperation, the police noticed several strange moments in his behavior. For example, Scott claimed that he was not worried when he returned home and did not find Lacy, which, from the point of view of investigators, looked strange for a husband whose pregnant partner had disappeared. These inconsistencies in his testimony began to arouse suspicion among the police. Then the police learned that Scott was not a model husband. On January 17, 2003, it became known that Scott Peterson had cheated on his wife Lacy 3 times. Amber Frey, a masseuse he was introduced to by friends, played a key role in uncovering this information. Frey gave a statement to the police detailing their relationship. Amber said that she met Scott on November 20th, 2002, and he immediately declared that he was not married. They started dating, but soon, she suspected that he was hiding the truth. On December 9th, 2 weeks before Lacy disappeared, she asked him directly about it. Scott then admitted that he had lost his wife and that this would be his first Christmas holiday without her. After Lacy disappeared, Scott continued to mislead Amber. He informed her that he was going to Paris to celebrate the new year with friends whom he named Pascal and Francois. However, this was a lie. He made one of these calls from Modesto just a few minutes before participating in the New Year's vigil in memory of Lacy. Scott's behavior, his attempts to conceal the affair, and cynical statements about his wife reinforced the suspicions, not only of investigators, but also of the public. This turn in the case was another important step in the complex chain of investigation. But regardless of the suspicions, law enforcement agencies continued an intensive search for Laci. By April 2003, the case remained without progress. Numerous police forces, volunteers, rescue teams, and FBI agents were involved in the search for Lacy, but no significant traces or clues that could indicate her whereabouts were found. Amid the ongoing searches and accusations, Scott Peterson continued to claim that his wife had disappeared without a trace. He remained the center of attention, but all his efforts to find a wife did not bear fruit. An inexorable sense of growing uncertainty continued to overshadow events, and disparate versions and suspicions only increased tensions. It was only on April 13, 2003, after missing the mail 4 months after Lacy's update, that the turning point came, which gave hope for the disclosure of this important case. On that day, the remains of Lacy and her unborn son Connor were found, which were picked up on the shore in San Francisco Bay. Local residents passing by noticed strange objects washed up on the shore. After they informed the police, the trackers who found the remains immediately left there. At first, they couldn't figure out whose remains they were, but immediately, after careful research, it became clear that it was Laci Peterson and her unborn son, Connor.
That's one of the most critical pieces of evidence because Peterson places himself on that body of water where his wife and unborn child were dumped.
The find was shocking. Lacy's remains were located at a location that investigators determined was not far from where Scott Peterson said he was on the day she disappeared, on a lake near the bay. This opened up new horizons in the investigation and provided investigators with important evidence. It soon became apparent that the bodies had been dumped in the bay after Laci died. Forensic evidence confirmed that she died a violent death, and her unborn son died with her. This meant that Laci's death was not accidental and was most likely the result of a violent crime. The discovery of the bodies gave the police a new impetus for further investigations. Scott's testimony began to take on special significance. It was especially alarming that on the day she disappeared, he was in the area where her remains were found. In this context, the police began to collect evidence that could link him to the crime. With each new step of the investigation, the police became more and more confident that he was behind the tragedy. And finally, on April 18, 2003, a few months after Laci's disappearance, Scott Peterson was arrested. He was arrested near a golf course in La Jolla. He claimed that he planned to meet his father and brother to play golf. However, the circumstances of his detention raised many questions. At the time of his arrest, Peterson had changed his appearance, having dyed his hair from dark brown to blonde. His car was packed with things that looked like preparations to escape: $15,000 in cash, a life jacket, hiking gear, several sets of clothes, 4 cell phones, and his brother's driver's license in addition to his own. Peterson claimed that he needed his brother's license to get a discount on golf, and his father explained that Scott lived in the car because of media pressure. However, investigators found these explanations unconvincing, suggesting that Peterson was preparing to hide in Mexico, which later became part of the charges. These circumstances have become key elements in a case that has attracted national attention. On April 21, 2003, Scott Peterson was charged with 2 counts of murder: first degree for the death of his wife Laci, and second degree for the death of their unborn son Connor. Peterson has pleaded not guilty. After that, he was placed in isolation, where he awaited the start of the trial. The arrest and the details surrounding it have increased public attention to the case. Many considered the objects found and Peterson's behavior to be evidence of his guilt, although he continued to insist on his innocence. The start of the trial marked a new stage in one of America's most talked about cases. On January 20th, 2004, the trial venue was moved from Modesto to Redwood City. The judge made this decision due to concerns that in Modesto, a high level of public outrage could affect the fairness of the trial. Scott Peterson's trial began on June 1st, 2004, attracting huge media attention. Rick DiStasso became the main prosecutor, and the defense was represented by well-known lawyer Mark Garagos. In his opening statement, Garagos admitted that Peterson had acted meanly towards his wife by deceiving her, but insisted on his innocence. The defense argued that the investigation was conducted negligently. For example, Modesto police detective Mike Hermos admitted that he did not check the alibi of the woman who also appeared in the case, who stole checks from Peterson's mailbox, but explained that she was never a suspect. The prosecutor, in turn, stressed that these checks were stolen after Laci's disappearance, excluding the woman's connection with the crime. Among other controversial points was the absence of an audio recording of Peterson's interrogation. The tape recorder simply did not have batteries. The defense used these facts to question the professionalism of the investigation. Peterson's lawyers insisted that there was no direct evidence of his guilt. They suggested that Laci could have been abducted, held in captivity until the baby was born, and then disposed of the bodies. However, the prosecution experts said that the child was premature and died with his mother. The trial also faced difficulties among the jurors. One of them, Francis Gorman, was suspended for violating the rules. Later, the foreman of the jury, Gregory Jackson, recused himself, presumably due to pressure from colleagues, which caused threats against him. As a result, he was replaced, and the trial continued, with a new composition. After several weeks of intense trials and court hearings, on November 12, 2004, the jury returned with a verdict. Scott Peterson was found guilty of 2 counts of first-degree murder for Laci's death and second-degree murder for the death of their unborn son, Connor. The court sentenced Scott to death. The court described Laci Peterson's murder as cruel, indifferent, heartless, and callous. This description highlights the terrible and ruthless behavior of Scott, who became the main suspect in the case. The jury, in turn, explained their verdict by saying that they relied on hundreds of small pieces of the puzzle from circumstantial evidence that arose during the trial. In their opinion, Peterson's lack of emotion and his calls to Amber Frey immediately after Laci's disappearance were important signals. Their decision was also influenced by the circumstances of the arrest, a lot of lies and irrefutable evidence related to the location of Laci's body. After sentencing, Scott Peterson was transferred to a correctional facility for prisoners, awaiting execution. However, the trial in his case continued. The trial has caused strong emotions in the community, especially among residents of California. Many people believed that Scott deserved the death penalty for the murder of his wife and son. However, there were those who doubted the fairness of this decision. Some argued that the trial was too hasty and that Scott could have been innocent. This trial became an important event in the history of criminal law and showed how much the media can influence the perception of the case by society. The high-profile media constantly monitored the trial, and every day in court attracted the attention of viewers across the country. Despite the verdict, the public debate continued, and the Scott Peterson case remained in the spotlight for many years to come. After the sentencing in 2004, Scott Peterson's defense did not stop fighting for his release. In 2012, Peterson's lawyer filed an appeal, arguing that excessive publicity of the trial, misinterpretation of evidence, and other errors violated his client's right to a fair trial. Later, in 2015, the defense presented new objections, pointing out possible errors in the work of the service dog, which allegedly failed several tests. In the same year, they filed a motion for a retrial, citing the fact that one of the jurors perjured herself, and some neighbors allegedly saw Laci alive after Scott left the house. However, the prosecution insisted that the evidence gathered during the investigation irrefutably confirms Peterson's guilt. In 2019, despite ongoing appeals, the governor of California, Gavin Newsom, imposed a moratorium on capital punishment, which also applied to Peterson. This decision temporarily abolished executions for more than 25 prisoners sentenced to death, including him. The trial continued, and in 2020, the California Supreme Court reviewed Peterson's case. The defense argued that the jury had been improperly suspended and also insisted that some of the judge's actions could have affected the fairness of the trial. Ultimately, on August 24, 2020, the Supreme Court overturned the death sentence, but confirmed Peterson's guilt. In 2021, the case took a new turn. Scott Peterson was sentenced to life in prison without the right to parole. The court also ordered additional punishment for the murder of Connor's unborn son. This verdict came into force in December 2021, ending years of litigation. The deaths of Laci and her unborn son Connor triggered important legislation in the United States. On April 1, 2004, President George W. Bush signed the Unborn Victims of Violence Act, also known as the Laci and Connor Act. This law makes it a crime to kill or injure an unborn child in the case of violence against a pregnant woman. This legal innovation expands the rights of protection for unborn children who have become victims of crime. In January 2006, Laci's mother, Sharon Rocha, released the book For Laci, A Mother's Story of Love, Loss, and Justice. In this book, she talks about the life and death of her daughter, focusing on grief and the search for justice. All funds received from the sale of the book were used to create the Laci and Connor Search and Rescue Foundation, which Sharon founded in memory of her daughter. The book became a bestseller, taking first place on the New York Times documentary bestseller list. Laci Peterson dreamed of a happy family full of love and support. She was looking forward to the birth of her son, dreaming of creating a cozy home for her child and husband, but her life was cut short in its prime. Laci didn't have time to become the mother she so wanted to be, didn't have time to create the home she dreamed of. She did not see or experience the moments of happiness she had hoped for. Laci's tragic death has become a symbol of lost dreams of happiness and harmony in the family. Her dreams of a future full of joy and love are in the past, and her loved ones are left with the pain and bitterness of loss, wondering why her happiness was so cruelly taken away. The story of Laci and Connor Peterson has left an indelible mark on the hearts of those who witnessed this terrible fate. This case has become a catalyst for changes in legislation. The murder was not only a personal tragedy for the family, but also led to an important legal innovation, the Sastorius Eridicrum Sans or Tibertis Shachens Valadierius Laci and Connor Act, which protects the rights of unborn children in cases of violence against pregnant women. This story reminds us of the fragility of life and the importance of protecting those who cannot protect themselves. The Laci and Connor law is an important step towards recognizing the value of life at all its stages. Laci's story teaches us to appreciate every moment with our loved ones, to be aware of our responsibility to others, and not to be afraid to fight for justice, even when it seems that the situation is hopeless.